Hello, welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm making an old Southern classic, and that's a Coca-Cola cake. This recipe has been around for generations, and I can see why. It's absolutely delicious. If you've never had a Coca-Cola cake before, you're in for a treat. It's basically a rich chocolate cake that's been boosted to a whole nother level. It is so good, and what does the trick for this cake is this Coca-Cola. I'm starting with 2 sticks of salted butter. Now I've let this soften. As a matter of fact, don't throw these away. I'm putting these right in my baking dish because I'm going to use these butter wrappers to butter my baking dish. And to that, I'm adding 1/4 cup of unsweetened cocoa powder, and this goes right on my butter. Now for the Coca-Cola part of this cake, make sure that it is the real thing. You don't want a sugar-free Coke in your Coca-Cola cake. The sugar is important. And I'm using 1 cup of Coca-Cola. Now hang on to this. We're going to use more of this in our frosting. And this is going right in. Look at that fizz. Now, one of the things that I've done to make this a little easier is I am putting this in the microwave. You can definitely melt this down on your stovetop and bring it to a boil, but I found that microwaving it is a lot easier, and I'm going to microwave this for 2 minutes. While that's in the microwave, I'm just going to butter my dish. I'm using a 9x13 baking dish, and obviously this is glass. If you're going to use a metal baking pan, then you might want to flour the bottom of it, but for the glass baking dish, just a little butter is perfect. I'm just going to whisk this up really good. You just want to make sure that that cocoa powder is completely blended in with the Coca-Cola and the butter. Heating up the cocoa powder like this gives this cocoa a richer flavor. Heating it definitely brings out all of the flavor, so we want all the flavor we can get. Back in the microwave this goes for 1 minute. This looks perfect. I don't know why it's easier to use the microwave, but in my opinion, it just is. Now, I am going to let this sit for just a few minutes. I want to let it cool for just a little bit. As a matter of fact, if you want to make this a good, let's say 15 minutes before you start putting your cake ingredients together, that is just fine, because we're adding eggs to this cake and I don't want to have to temper my eggs. So I'm going to let this cool just a minute. Stay right there. Now for the dry ingredients. Like I said, I've simplified this recipe a little bit. I'm using self-rising flour. That way I don't have to add the baking powder. It's already done for me and it works perfectly. Now I'm adding 2 cups of my White Lily self-rising flour, and that's going right in. Now I'm adding 2 cups of sugar. Now some of the recipes call for you to add marshmallows. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a fan of the marshmallows. I don't feel like it adds that much to the cake. Plus they all float to the top and they don't really get throughout the cake. But if you do want to add the marshmallows, 1/2 cup, then reduce your sugar content to 1 3/4 cup. Now I just want to stir this together. I love this cake because it doesn't require a mixer. There we go. Now, for a little bit more wet ingredients, I have 2 whole eggs, And I'm just gonna go ahead and break these up. And I've also got a 1/2 cup of whole buttermilk. And I'm adding that to my eggs. And last but not least, I have got 2 teaspoons of vanilla. Or maybe just a little bit more. Now, I'm going to set that aside, and it's time to start adding our Coca-Cola mixture. And that's going all in at one time. Still a little bit warm, but I'm hoping this flour is going to cool it off. If not, we may be in trouble. I might have a scrambled egg Coca-Cola cake. Now I'm just going to mix this together really good. You know, I had kind of forgotten about this cake, and recently I was watching the Barefoot Contessa, and she had Faith Hill on her show, and I am a big Faith Hill fan. Always have been. And she made this cake and told how this was Tim McGraw's favorite cake. And I thought, you know, that's something I haven't made in a while. It is time to bring out that recipe. Now this is all blended together. See, it's nice and smooth, and I just want to feel it. It's warm, but it's not hot. And that is perfect. Now come the eggs, the buttermilk, and the vanilla. And these are all going in. I'm just going to stir it. This is such a great cake. Just been around forever. I'm not quite sure how it was invented, but in my mind I'm thinking, somebody must have ran out of buttermilk and decided that they would use a Coca-Cola instead. That sounds practical to me. I've got my buttered baking dish, and I'm going to pour this right in. This is ready to go into the oven. I have my oven preheated to 350 degrees, and this is going to cook anywhere from 25 to, let's say, 35 minutes. This is a wet batter, but believe me, it is going to make the moistest, most delicious cake. Just make sure that you insert your toothpick, and when it comes out clean, it's ready to go. My cake just has a few more minutes, and I just need to say it smells wonderful in this kitchen, like a chocolate paradise. So good. Now I'm going to make the frosting for this cake, or icing, whatever you want to call it. We're actually going to pour this frosting over a hot cake, so I want to go ahead and make it before the cake is ready. I have a stick of salted butter. Remember, I told you not to put away the Coca-Cola. I'm adding 6 tablespoons of Coca-Cola to this. Now I'm going back to the microwave. I'm going to melt this butter, and I'm going to microwave it for about a minute. Give it a good stir, and I'll show you what we're going to do next. There we go. Butter is nice and melted. I just want to whisk this together. And now for more chocolate. This is a 1/4 cup of unsweetened cocoa powder. And remember how I told you that heating the cocoa powder brings all of the flavor to life? Well, I am putting this back in the microwave for 1 minute. That's a lot of trips back and forth, but believe me, it's worth it. Look at this. You can see how just heating this up to almost a boil really brings that cocoa powder to life. Now I have 3 cups of powdered sugar, and I've already measured it out, and I'm just going to add this little bits at a time. Just stir this in. Now it's time for the vanilla, and I'm adding a teaspoon. This looks just right. Now, I'm sure you've noticed I've got some chopped pecans here. I toasted these chopped pecans in the microwave for 2 minutes. And this is an optional ingredient, but we love pecans. Now you can also use walnuts in this. It's delicious. And instead of putting the pecans on top of the cake, I love them mixed in with this frosting. And you know what? I'm just going to give it a little taste test just to make sure that we don't need a pinch of salt. That is perfection right there. The cake has finished cooking, and it took about 35 minutes. It takes just a little bit longer with a glass pan. Now, I am going to poke just a few holes in this cake. I told you this was old-fashioned. There's nothing more old-fashioned than a poke cake. That looks perfect. I don't want many, but I just want enough so that some of this icing can go right down into the cake. Now I want to give this a stir. And remember, this has just come out of the oven. Super important. You want to frost this when this cake is nice and hot. Doesn't this look fantastic? Now you could cut it up and serve it right now, but it's a little too hot to eat. I'm gonna let this sit a few minutes and then I'll cut into it. I'm so excited. I can't wait another minute, and neither can my husband. He has been smelling this cake for the last hour or so, and I think I've made him wait just about as long as you can. Now it's still really, really hot. Let's see if I can get this out. My impatience got the best of me on this one. It is too hot to cut. So I'm actually using a spoon for this. But that's okay. Cake is cake, and I promise you that it'll serve up beautifully if you'll let it sit for the amount of time that it needs to, which I would say would be a good 30 minutes. Let's see how we did. This is out of this world good. It's so moist and flavorful. And look at this cake. See how nice and moist that is? Next time you want to make a chocolate cake, make a Coca-Cola cake instead. I promise you will not be sorry. You are a blessing to me. Thanks so much for watching today. Would you press that like button and share this video with your friends? And if you haven't already, subscribe to my Kathy's Southern Kitchen page on YouTube and Facebook. Well, I'm going to cut another piece of this hot cake for my husband. I'll see you next time.